All right. Hello.
Hello.
We're now using their audio. And this is Scott and Naomi at GRN. We're going to do a brief demo of how to search for projects that you hear about in the news to see whether or not they have a wetlands permit. This is a common thing in Louisiana that we hear about these big industrial projects in the news. We know that they're going to be in the wetlands because we know more about the situations in our own area than anyone else does, especially the financial press or even the regional press. We know how those areas flood. We know about the endangered species, the eagles, the fish, crawfish in those areas. We know about the existing problems in those areas: air pollution, sicknesses, lack of drinking water, and all of these things we want to put into public notice and comment to improve projects, especially pipeline projects, because there's a lot to improve in every step of the way, or to stop projects that are just completely obnoxious and racist and dumb. Yeah. So we most permitted wetlands impacts in Louisiana are industrial, and there's all kinds of reasons why you wouldn't want to put a large industrial facility in the wetlands. But we usually only have 20 days to comment, so we can use the Louisiana Department of Natural Resources Office of Coastal Management system, the map, to check for things before there's any public notice, saying you now have 20 days to write a 30-page objection letter. Yeah, so Travis, this is for you. We made it. In particular, Travis London up the river was curious about one of the big pipelines that was proposed. I'm missing what it is now.
ACE.
It was the ACE pipeline. Yeah. So I'll share a screen about an email I went through, starting to describe to Travis, how to do this. What I'm looking for in the sunrise map, sorry, there's links you can bookmark that if you find something, you can use an 8-digit number to find out a lot about the project, including the coastal landowners, just the impacts of the project. You can get engineering diagrams from which you can make FOIA requests for GIS products. I just said a bunch of acronyms, so let's go into a little bit of what those are.
Right.
Once we get explicit maps, we can do environmental justice analysis. This is comparing how the project impacts certain Black groups that are disproportionately Native American, disproportionately non-white or minority, the terminology used, or disproportionately below the poverty level compared to the parish. It's parish, not county here in Louisiana. So, we know, for example, that certain areas get targeted by these industrial projects because they foresee that there won't be ability to politically resist them because of the racist way our society is organized. So at GRN, we take that very seriously, and we want the agencies to take it more seriously, and so we encourage them to. But we can also do these sociological analyses ourselves to some extent, so we can uplift that message of, you know, all of our liberation and freedom on the coast it's all interrelated. You know, we have to free the land to free ourselves, and we each have to see one another to free one another. So we can get into that analysis as well as how to make different document requests from this initial document search. And we'll wrap it up by going into a draft comment letter. Unfortunately, a lot of the projects, such as this Swordfish pipeline, which may or may not be the ACE pipeline, which may or may not be the Crimson Midstreamer finance project. It seems like those are all the same thing. It's going into St. James, so we have a lot of the comment language already written since we've been working for 2 years in St. James on the issues. But we'll go into the draft comment letter. You can start writing even before you've completed the environmental justice analysis, which you can do once you have a little bit of a map that you can get from searching the Sunrise map or from a records request, a Freedom of Information Act request for any more explicit geographic information systems data.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Are the Sunrise maps, the records are published there before they're published in the public notices for Department of Natural Resources?
Right.
Okay.
There's no regular timeline, but I will say generally companies see the wetland permitting process as an afterthought, and they see the financing for the project as front of mind, forethought. Sometimes it's the only thing, right? You wonder if these projects aren't sometimes just people scamming other people out of their investor money, right? Like the Sasol North America project that had to do, I don't know, several $1 billion worth of write-downs because they figured out that, oh no, they had to build their industrial project in a wetland. They weren't going to be able to complete it. They figured that out in 2017 after we had been complaining for 4 years about it. You wonder if that project was just a way to get, to wash someone's money or to swindle someone else. But assuming these companies actually mean to complete these projects, usually they don't consider the wetlands first and foremost, although for us, it's kind of the only thing. The first and primary thing is the wetlands as our shelter, food, and the water is the things we drink. But what will happen before we get a public notice that there's an application, especially for a large project, a large industrial project, and this is the case for 2 of the many pipelines proposed for St. James. We have a Formosa pipeline coming out of the proposed Formosa Sunshine site, which is run by a company called Boardwalk. And we have this, Travis put us on to the financial press for the Swordfish pipeline. And I'm going to go through searching the location for the Swordfish pipeline. The department received an application. They received geographic information systems data, which enabled them to put up a line on the map. And they created a numerical designation for the project, even though they don't have all the documents yet.
I see.
They don't have a completed application. When they get a completed application, there will be a public notice.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's why they publish the map first, that's usually the information they have first.
It tends to be for a larger project, and the Corps has just announced at the end of 2018 that pretty soon the these kinds of wetland delineations will be required from all applicants. So there will be geographic information for almost all of the hundreds and hundreds of applications we see in the New Orleans district of the core. That jurisdiction overlaps with the coastal zone pretty well. So with the core, we'd have to do a FOIA and wait 60 days to get the information. The Department of Natural Resources is funded by NOAA to just put it online. They're much more open about their documents. It saves them a lot of time that we would otherwise be making public records requests, getting these things. So, yeah, sometimes the map will tell you more than the public notice announcement. I think we took 5 minutes to say that. So let's look at it. I'm going to share my screen. And just go to the Sunrise page, sonrise.com, sonras.com. And, the Department of Natural Resources, you'll see the majority of their concerns is oil drilling, right? That's why the department was founded. They were also delegated wetlands regulation at the same time. And they also regulate surface water and to some extent wells and pipelines, and they have some other duties, but mostly they're about oil drilling. So mostly this is about, how's your well producing? And what royalties do you owe the state of Louisiana? But this first link here is the GIS access link, which takes you to a map that we're going to use to search. You have the whole state. It's for oil and gas, right? But also all of these other things. You have the table of contents, oil and gas, mineral resources, coastal management is what we're concerned with. You have the environmental category, which is interesting. You have the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority for the master plan, as well as coastal, environmental data monitoring stations. You have different project layers for the coastal master plan projects. Because part of, what Department of Natural Resources is not supposed to be permitting anything that's inconsistent with a master plan. We don't want to put a pipeline through a forest that Louisiana has spent millions and billions of dollars restoring. Water wells, groundwater geology information, USGS aquifer information, surface water information, a lot of that has to do with different dams across the state as well. There's different boundary layers for different jurisdictions. Different rules have different boundaries, right? So they have that. Reference is like some other things you might be interested in, such as state lands, different names of water bodies. And then you have all kinds of maps. Aerial photo series from 2005 to 2016. Give you different aerial photos of the coastal zone, as well as some historical land survey maps, which can be interesting. But now we're just going to merely focus on coastal management, and those are our wetlands permits. And we're going to look at St. James in particular, since we're looking for this pipeline that goes from behind St. James through Bayou Verret, north of Raceland and down to Clovelly Field in Lafourche Parish. So there's Ascension. The border of St. James and Lafourche is right there. So we're going to focus in on it. And, we can go down to the reference if you're confused about exactly where you are. We can use some of these maps. They even have LiDAR. Ooh. I don't know what historic is. And this is slow. Oh, that was a good one. Okay. And the historic is not always in color. Let's get something a little bit more consistent. Or maybe you're used to looking at a Google Earth true color photo. So we have that. And, here's Donaldsonville, here's District 5 St. James, where all the pipelines come in and out of, and that pipeline will go through wetlands north of Lafourche and then turn south. It's going through Lake Buff. So the thing we know about, the pipeline is that it would come out of the oil transshipment area in District 5. So we might focus in on that first. And then look at different permits. So we've got 3 different kinds of permit layers. If you know geographic information systems, you're very familiar with points, which is a single point, a line, which is the second dimension. We click on lines, and that's where a lot of these pipelines are. But some of them are in the polygons layer, which has a lot of different shapes. So we can see that this right-of-way, the Vivarais, has all 3 of those things, right? And I think the first thing I saw when Travis sent me that map of the Swordfish is that this corridor has all of these points on it. So even though they're points, that's probably a pipeline, right? It's just a series of points to designate that there's probably been a lot of different repairs of existing pipelines in that right-of-way. So when Travis first asked me to focus on this area, I went to this map, I looked behind St. James Parish, I saw this point layer, and a thing in a line was obviously a pipeline, and I selected a small area. I'm going to do that again. When you click on the points layer, it gives you a drop down, and you can either download the whole layer to your own GIS, which is a whole other thing some of us know how to do. We can identify features with this blue icon, and so we just click on that one, and it'll bring up that this is 2018 0017, a pipeline repair at location 45. We can click on A, which will give you labels, which might break the website. Oh, there it goes. Okay. So if you need to label which permit it is, that can be useful. But normally I just I know I'm looking for a particular area, so I'm going to do this rectangle select, and it's going to give me a couple of different things. I got 2018, 17, 2015, 0094, more pipeline repairs, pipeline repair, anomaly repairs, a lot of repairs, at least 3, 4, 2010, 18, repair. So there's a lot of repairing going on here, including this one I can't see right now. You can click on this Excel document to download this list. You can click on this to make it go up. I guess yeah, 2007 repair of ExxonMobil pipeline. So these are probably all ExxonMobil. The thing about once you find one pipeline that's in the location that you want to search. Let's say you've heard about the project in the financial press, but you don't think they have an application yet. But you want to create a bookmark in your browser so you can come back to this map. You don't want to have to do all this all over again. You just want one bookmark so you can check on this every Monday, and then go about your day. You might select one of these here. It's an 8-digit number with a P in front of it. This is P 2007-1251. And then there's a kind of link. I call it the live map link that you can create that'll just bring you to this pipeline. So let's see, this is my email. Oh, well, I picked 2018-0017. This was a general permit, so we never got a public notice for this permit to disturb about 13 acres of wetlands to repair the pipeline in this right-of-way. So there's a big, long, you can go to there's all these different URLs associated with Office of Coastal Management. And I think this one, I call it the CMD. It's just the informational link for 2018-0017. We can paste that into a browser, and it gives you all this stuff about what it is. It gives you a core number. So if you wanted to write a FOIA or comment, or if you wanted to report that this pipeline was leaking and tell the Corps about it, you could use that reference number that tells them where this pipeline is. This is a repair of 17 anomalies on an existing 16-inch crude oil pipeline from the ExxonMobil company. You can see who the agent is. This is Mr. Riley Boudreau, probably up in Baton Rouge, yeah, for Exxon. He's the one talking to the government. You can see the impacts. There's two different habitats it's impacting. One is unconsolidated, not a habitat, basically. And if we click on that, it gives you, there's 11 acres of just open water and unconsolidated bottom that it's affecting. That's not considered a wetlands habitat. This is a marsh habitat, PEM. Is freshwater marsh. F. F, there's a scale from A to H about how flooded is this marsh. So F is much more flooded than A, but F is less flooded than H. F is pretty flooded. It's probably flooded most of the year, or only occasionally not flooded, I think. I think F is semi-permanently flooded, is a technical word. And there's 13.72 acres that don't have to be mitigated for these repairs. They're going to go in there, tear up the marsh. They're going to wait a year, see if the marsh grows back. And if it grows back, they're not going to ding Exxon for mitigation.
And if it doesn't grow back,
They're
also not going to ding Exxon.
Well, that's certainly, you know,
That's the
we,
pessimist view.
yeah, GRN as advocates, we tend to think that there will not be enforcement. And I think if you look at a map of the Louisiana coast, you might agree with us. Someone who is working for the agency would not agree with us.
Right. Oh, sure. That's not, and that's what this is what they're supposed to be doing.
That's what it's supposed to be doing. Yeah. They do it sometimes. It does. It happens.
So how did you get to the habitat?
I went to that first link,
Yeah.
which is the permit tracking system. It gives you all of the general information. It gives you geographic information. That's not really working right now. And then there's this button called Impacts, and so you can go look at that. Yeah, slow response, but there it gave me the impacts. You can click through all of that, or let's see. You can click on the live map link, right?
Okay.
And that, you know, you could spend all day on these different things. But I think what we want to do is just create a placeholder on the map. So this is the link that you would put in your browser that immediately just sends you to that right of way that you think there's a new pipeline proposed, right? So maybe it's only been in the press. You still need to search for it. Now, this puts up a lot of different information all at once, this live map link. It's template 181. I don't know if there's any other templates, but that template puts up all these layers, displays all of these things, including a buffer, which is a mile. and I think that's 1/5 of a mile.
How,
we
will you
can-
go back to how you got the right of way instead of just the point that you were looking at?
Well,
You know what I mean? Does it?
the right of way is just my word for the sum of all these locations.
Uh-huh.
Since they're listing us as a point layer, it's not really a right of way. It's all the anomaly.
Okay, but how did you get to select more than one point? Weren't we just looking at one point?
The single permit 2018-0017 is a set of all these points.
Oh, okay.
So,
I didn't realize that.
right.
Okay.
And you can see all these other points where there's 2 different repairs in 2015. There was a repair in 2010. Those are also some of these points. And there's a repair in 2007.
Okay.
Generally, if there's a new pipeline that we don't know about, it's not going to be in the point layer. We just want to use this link so we don't have to do all that searching again and again. We just want to have a link that we search every Monday for a thing that we think is coming to our neighborhood.
Yeah.
This is our neighborhood. We've defined our neighborhood. Then what we want to do, we want to turn off seismic. That just doesn't give us a lot of information. We could even turn off polygons first. I think really what we want, and we could turn off points even. Because if there's a new pipeline proposed, it's going to be in this lines layer, which is this blue. And you notice template 181 gives us this USGS map background. It's a little bit different than Google Earth, but it shows you where the farms are and where the forest is. So we take that lines layer now, and we can download it again if we're savvy enough to do geographic information systems and work in Google Earth. We can put the names up again.
Oh, great.
Which might be good if it's coherent enough. We want to look for anything in the current year. So we're in January 2019. It's still pretty new in January. So any number with a 2019 or even a 2018, we want to investigate further. And so I see a little 2018 over there. That looks interesting to me. I'm going to turn that off because normally what I do is I select by the rectangle, and I'm just going to select a part of that right away that'll give me a number of things that are proposed or permitted as a line. So in this case, this wouldn't be repairs, ... It would be the whole pipeline.
But it doesn't show you right away whether it's proposed or already permitted. You have to go into the documents and look at that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It'll give you a list down here, and you can download this list with the Excel. What does this one do? That one will clear it. This will minimize it, or you can maximize it. And it says we found 4 things, and none of them are 2018. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I think I found the ACE pipeline by going a little further down. How did I find it? Oh, maybe I made a slightly different selection. That gives us more features, 9, but the latest one is 2016. And this sorts by year too. So you can really find, that latest one in this right away is Texas Brine. How did I find it then? Okay, so maybe I want to pick a different neighborhood. We still have those there. Did I find it because it was coming up with Lafourche? No, that's 1990. If you don't find anything, you can, just make your selection box really huge. And there I've got it popped up to the top. We've got a 2018. We've got a 2017 from the levee district. We've got 2014 Genesis pipeline. You know, linear features are going to be in this lines. So we've got levees, we've got drains, we've got canals, we've got pipelines. All these things, or power lines a lot of the time. All these things that are very linear in their geography.
Mhm.
So there I found it. I had to go a little bit lower. Okay, so 2018 was interesting. You know, 2014 is permitted, and you can check in the status. Authorization granted means they get issued the permit for it. You can do, and here you have, blah, 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 benefits. Which is the mitigation. So you can look at the impacts of this Genesis pipeline. If we're concerned about, you know, hey, what were the impacts? Again, they're in codes. You have to know a lot of things to read this.
Where do you look up those habitat codes?
From the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. But M means marsh, F means forest. So we're really concerned about forest, especially cypress forest, which is 2. I know. But let's consider, you know, it's only a couple of acres of this kind of habitat. So Department of Natural Resources summarized some losses of forest in the Terrebonne Basin. The applicant submitted 2.63 acres, and they cut that down to 1.34, right? And that's a lot of what Office of Coastal Management, they like that. You know, they're trying to shave off, trying to save some trees here and there. We don't disagree with that. So this is, you know, this is where a lot of their work is. And then, but, you know, that's unavoidable, 1.34. That had to be mitigated somewhere. So you can go to benefits and see if they mitigated the forest. And it tells you, usually it's a mitigation bank purchase. And this is just the record of that transaction being completed or not. Yeah, they paid for 11 acres of forest. So, you know, we want to see that, and, you know, if we know Grand Coteau Mitigation Bank, I'm not familiar with it, but if we know it's a bad one, if we know now that that's didn't work, we want to be very skeptical about any new thing going in. So let's check out this other one, not the levee district. Voila, Ace Pipeline, LLC. I was like, oh man, a new pipeline. You can see all this is blank, right? So it's new. And you can double check that. It says status is received pending initial review. So that means they haven't looked at it very much yet.
But if it's been received, don't they have to issue the public notice, or that's not yet?
Well, the applicant has to have a complete application, and the permit writer has to write it up. Those are the basic. There's more than that, but those are basically the things that have to happen before the department says, okay, this application is complete and we have a public notice. You have 20 days to comment, guys. This will say if there was a public notice, if there's any cross-reference numbers. The Corps likes to reuse old permit numbers. So if this was proposed 20 years ago, they'll reuse, like, you know, 1995.
You mean if it's the same project?
If it's the same footprint,
okay.
right? Sometimes, yeah. So the DNR, though, will create a new number. Okay. So you'll sometimes see that all the lists of the previous numbers go over here. You want to look at, it's a pipeline flow line. Flow line is a small pipeline. This is a proposed ACE pipeline project, construction of 300,000 feet, 58 miles of new 30-inch. It's pretty big. That is not a flow line. That is a crude oil transmission. Or some products pipelines get that big. That's generally something that big is going to be crude. And indeed, crude oil pipeline from an existing terminal in St. James to the loop facility in Galliano. Sometimes that's called the Clovelly Field. The line will be installed via open cut and horizontal directional drills and bores under roadways, waterways, and levees. So for Bayou Bridge, we had over 700 of those open cuts and horizontal drills, and the overwhelming majority were just opening it up, just cutting right through the stream. So, 700 for that pipeline. This one is not nearly as long. Maybe it's a third or a fourth of the length of Bayou Bridge, but so you think of hundreds and hundreds of streams that will be cut.
Yeah.
We know Bayou Verret. We care a lot about that. That's like the main, way that water travels and replenishes the wetlands, and it's the main fish corridor for anyone hunting in St. James or anyone who's fishing off 3127. So we don't want that waterway to be polluted or blocked. But they will be mucking that up a little bit probably, as well as a bunch of other ones. So there's also going to be 2 pump stations and intermediate mainline valve sites with access roads and 35 temporary access roads. So some of the access roads are new roads which have wetland impact permanently. Others are boards that are laid down so that the excavators can get in and dig a pipeline trench, string a pipeline out, board platforms so that the welding station can be erected and weld the pipeline together and move it down into the trench once the trench is flooded. Approximately 800,000 cubic yards of material will be excavated, stockpiled, and used as backfill upon successful installation. So, a lot of the material will be just from the site. Approximately 556 cubic yards of limestone will be hauled in for construction of valve sites, probably the pumping stations, valve site access roads, because those are things. Well, one, they're sites of pollution, but they're also permanent installations that have to be maintained and checked over the life of the pipeline. So those tend to be more the, where you're going to have ongoing, people interacting with the pipeline in those locations, or wherever it spills, leaks out of, where they don't plan, for it to leak. And there'll be additionally limestone and sand for temporary access roads. I think we don't like to see that. I think we prefer that all temporary roads be board roads, because if they haul in sand, it's harder for them to remove it. And we end up with spoil banks and things that block the flow of water, things that pollute the water, things that kind of destroy the wetland values, that turn the wetlands into uplands, that destroy cypress habitat, that enable tallow invasion. We want to minimize additional limestone for any temporary access road. It's reasonable that they do it for something that's a permanent installation, but that's my first flag. Like, Bayou Bridge wasn't that sloppy, and Bayou Bridge is doing a lot of things wrong right now. They're doing a lot wrong, especially in the Atchafalaya Basin. But they didn't do that, so
they've used boards.
They've used boards.
Board roads. Okay.
So and they just dealt with it. They hired the local crews that know how to work in the wetlands. So this is another sign that they're not going to use local crews. They're trying to turn St. James into Dallas before they work there. You know what I mean? So bad. First flag. And then sand. An additional bunch of sand's going to put in for the push sites. So
what's a push site?
That is generally that for a bore or a horizontal drill. or for a welding station, any place that you're putting the pipeline together and pushing it around. It's also where you park work trucks and other things. It's kind of like construction. Sites that are they're only needed during construction.
So is sand necessary for that? Or something
No,
else? Okay.
no, it takes longer to put in board roads because it's implied you're going to pick them up. So already this project is stealing jobs and hours on the clock from our pipeline union, right? So we want local hire. We want local people who know how to operate machinery in the wetlands. And all this extra sand is telling you that people will come over from Houston to work this. People will come over from Mississippi. They're trying to make it a coastal plain environment before they work on the project. And you'll see this already. Already we have lots of pipelines on the coast, right? A lot of them turn into canals, and that's a problem closer to Clovelly Field, where you have pipelines that have been permitted in this right of way that are not in compliance. But also, and that's easy to see because there's open water where there should be marsh, right? They have that 1 year growing period, and the marsh should grow back. I shouldn't see any water in this right of way unless it's a natural bayou. But also, it's harder to see on the maps and the aerial photos. The elevation changes, the hydraulic changes that mess up the swamps behind St. James for people that hunt and fish back up in there. You're still changing the flow of water, but you're messing up the habitat, making it just more crummy, impounding it, and making the wetlands less functional. So yeah, already we've learned a lot. And then, these are we can look at impacts if we just copy and paste this 9-digit thing into thing. They don't have it yet. They haven't put it up, and they eventually they'll have an impacts database up in here. Get rid of Texas brine. We'll keep that up because this is our thing, ACE pipeline. This we don't have yet. Here's the map.
So now after you found that
There
record,
it is. We'll try to just select that one there, yeah. And then you can also click on document access. It gives you all kinds of things, but it doesn't really tell you what they are too well. There's a different menu that's a bit better. So you can look at all of the drawings, that's what these are, or internal comments. That'll be something from Department of Natural Resources. This is the GIS, so we'll keep that up because we'll talk about that in a minute. But rather than use this documents field, I like to go to, and we did that, right? Clicked on the coastal lines layer, we selected a line, and we found any line with a 2018 and 2019 number, and then I just found it, yay. A good link is the application link. Maybe let's highlight that one in blue. If you work with any lawyers, they love to talk about this and ask this from you. Although they don't quite understand sometimes, the lawyers, that the application is online. Often the Corps is also going to use this application. And they'll refer you to the Louisiana state system for their own permit, which is fascinating. So what do we have when we go to the application page? We have, the first thing says joint permit application. This says tracking. It says view comments, add comments. So you yourself can actually add a comment from this thing. You don't have to even write an email yet. Like this project doesn't have a manager yet, so there's no one to email except maybe Carl Morgan, who's the boss. But Carl's busy. You don't want to email him. You're not going to get it. maybe Stephanie Zumo, who is, more on point. She keeps track of a lot of things, Stephanie does. But you don't want to really take up her time because she's also really busy. You add your comment yourself, it's just on the file. And eventually whoever gets assigned this will read it. You can also look at whoever's, internal agency comments. So a lot of times the Corps will tell you, well, we can't give you our opinion on this because it's pre-decisional. You can't do a FOIA request. But they'll have given their document to DNR, and DNR will give it to you. Same thing with EPA, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Louisiana Department of Wildlife. All the agencies that comment on the permit, will of course send the department a copy because they have to read it and consider it. And you can read the agency comments. You can read any boosters of the project. If the lieutenant governor says, hey, I like this pipeline, it's good. Your parish president.
Put that in the comments.
They would send a letter to the department saying, hey, we're so-and-so. I'm Timmy Roussel. I'm the president of St. James Parish, and I want this pipeline. As we know, Mr. Roussel likes some of these projects. So we might see a letter from him. We might see a letter from, I don't know, the pipeline union in New Orleans East saying, hey, they're going to hire union labor. So please consider that when you're making your decision about, the costs and benefits of this project. You might see anybody, it's a public thing. Of course, this one has not been made public yet. So if we open that in a new tab, we're not going to see anything because no one knows about it yet. except us, because we know from, looking at this map for 8 years that sometimes this happens. And indeed it did happen in this situation. And then this is going to be a big project. This is at least 500 acres. Tracking tells you a little bit about where they're at. They made a number, tracking number. It's the ACE Pipeline project. They received it right before Christmas. They just put it in the file, and they haven't done anything else. And this, this tells you what document they've got and who wrote it. Right now, it's Office of Coastal Management. They just got on file. And so there's different color codings, for steps that they take in their process. So if you ever want to know, hey, Carl Morgan, what's up with this pipeline? Well, we just received it. We haven't even looked at it yet. Right. We did the tracking. You can look at the ad comments. It's kind of boring, but it's effective sometimes. You put your address. It's always other. You can't really change that. And then you write your comments. You can upload a file. If you have a report that says, hey, financing for these pipelines is terrible, put that report from that financial research that you've done, Travis, as a file, in this field. The GIS report is something we pulled up accidentally by going to this layer, and that tells you a lot too. It gives the permit reviewer, it's kind of automatically generated based on the shapefile that the applicant gave DNR. And this helps them. It gives that double buffer, right? I think it's a mile and then a fifth of a mile, or 1,000+ feet. And it spits out some things. Oh, the live map, right? That's that live map link for this. So rather than the Exxon pipeline, we can generate a live map for this pipeline. And you can look at all these other things, all these other reference layers. And that's that same buffer at 1320 and 5280, which is a mile. Right, so get rid of that one. And you have all these other permits, mitigation banks, sensitive areas, seismic, coastal restoration projects. That's what all this, like thousands and thousands of dots are. so much you can't even see anything else on the map, right? Yeah. Woof. So this legend will tell you the buffers return other projects and other permits that are associated, on the map. That's how they tell if there's a direct or indirect impact. I think Gene Turner would rather this buffer be 2 kilometers. Is 2 kilometers kind of like a mile? It's a mile plus. So Gene Turner would probably want this buffer to be bigger based on his research on how water flows on the Louisiana coast. But DNR, hey, they do a mile. Okay, within a mile, and even the color code breaks it down. Less than 500 feet, less than 1,500 feet, within a quarter mile, within a half mile, within 1 mile. So coastal zone, true. Conservation plan, true. Atchafalaya Basin, false. So this pipeline is not in the Atchafalaya Basin. Is it on Chitimacha grounds? Yes. Does it go through some fast lands, which are wetlands behind a levee? Yes, and on feature. So state lands. Does this pipeline go through any lands owned by the state? Yes. Does it go through any state water bottoms? Yes. Does it interact with the sand mining for LA Highway 1? No.
Why is
that's
Highway 1?
I don't know, it's a special thing in Lafourche Parish.
Oh, okay.
And since we're going through Lafourche Parish, maybe that pops up.
Oh, maybe it's just specific to the parish.
Yeah, there's going to be sand pits somewhere that they use to build LA1, and we don't want the pipeline to go through sand pits that we're using for another thing. So this is just a geographic check. Nope. Does it go through Bayou Lafourche? Nope. Does it go through the Mississippi River corridor? Not the river itself. So false. Parishes, St. James. St. James is parish number 47 on the national list of parishes. Lafourche is parish number 29. Louisiana is state number 22. So if you see, if you want to know, St. James is then 22047, and that tells you, nationally which parish, which county St. James is in the whole United States. Similarly, Lafourche is 22049. Louisiana is 22049. Which USGS maps can you look up to learn about this pipeline thing? Well, Donaldsonville. These are all the names. So if you have big maps in your desk in your office at Office of Coastal Management, and you want to learn about, you can look up the Gaines map, and that'll have part of the pipelines going through Gaines. Hydrologic basin, the Barataria Basin. Does it conflict with the master plan feature? Yes, it is on feature to the AMA sediment diversion. So we're very concerned about that at GRN, that this is a conflict between this pipeline and the benefits of the AMA sediment diversion. That sediment diversion is supposed to be sustaining coastal forests through 2067, and this is going to cut down a lot of that forest, maybe 400 acres of that forest. So it's going to reduce the ecological benefits of that project by just removing all the trees. We don't like that. So we want CPRA to say something about that. Anything. Anything at all, really. Mostly they will say no objection at this time, which, not so great. But the fact that there is an overlap here means that whatever manager is assigned this project will send an email to CPRA saying, hey, anybody looking at this? The thing is, I don't know if there's a project manager for the AMA sediment diversion, because last time for Bayou Bridge, CPRA was nowhere on this kind of conflict. And I think it's because they're understaffed. But we want them to at least acknowledge that, hey, it's taken 400 acres off of our project. We want them to acknowledge that. Ideally, we would want them to say, hey, and you got to move the project so it doesn't mess it up. But that's, we are where we are. Baby steps. There's other CPRA projects that are also conflicts. You'll notice they're in blue, so they're quarter mile. And they're either running within a quarter mile of this hydrologic restoration, which has been built, status constructed. So that's a waterway that gets fresh water to Hoosh Parish to sustain coastal marshes. So there might be some pollution or something if that pipeline is running through that channel or around that channel. There's the Morganza to the Gulf levee project, which has not been constructed. The pipeline is either going to run through or along the levee. You know, they're going to be they might be digging up the levee. Might be going under. They will go underneath the levee because Louisiana, although they're not taking these diversions so seriously, they take those levees very seriously. Same thing with LaRose to Golden Meadow. That used to be a federal levee. Now it's a state levee. Project, this other LaRose sheet pile, it's a little bit further from these other levees. They're basically levees. Valentine, St. Rose. A lot of times you'll see levees, they have names like that. This place to this place. It's like a linear segment of a levee. You know, flood protection means levee generally. It might mean a gate. Sheet pile is even more specific on what kind of flood protection it is.
That's a gate?
No, it's a T-wall or an I-wall. It's steel, interlocking steel plates. And it might have a levee around it, but you'll see those interlocking steel plates. And those are just the polygons, right? Yeah, and I'm not sure what the difference is between master plan and project boundaries, polygons line. They're all kind of the same. These are conflicts between our coastal restoration features, our coastal protection features, and the pipeline. So we've got, well, they have it's a bit of a, this is just a computer spitting this out. So the line features, it spits out the same thing. Okay. It's just a different overlay if you're familiar with GIS. But that's, 6 different CPRA evaluations that we want. And in the past, CPRA hasn't done that many. Coastal Reference Monitoring System stations. There are science stations in the path of the pipeline. They're going to mess up our data collection, long-term data collection. Wildlife management areas, Lake Buff WMA is not on blue. So what is that? Lake Buff is within 1 mile. I thought this runs right through Lake Buff. So I don't know. The color coding doesn't seem correct, but it's interesting. You have green, which is that on. Green is like, oh, definitely this conflicts between the Heritage Program data. The Heritage Program, and it's only been updated in 2013, is where our rare plants and animals are. So I'm not sure what these numbers pertain to, but that means, that means that Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries has special areas of concern that this pipeline is running through. And then that means there's a lot of critters that also federally Fish and Wildlife Service is going to be interested in it. So bald eagle nests, rookeries for coastal wading birds. I don't know. I don't think we have endangered quillwort over here, but there's on the Pearl River, there's endangered plants. I think we probably do have some endangered plants in the food, but might not have been designated. Mitigation. So there's wetlands that have been designated as restoration for other permits. Forest restoration. And I think those forest restoration being ripped up, that's a bit more than marsh. Marsh can come back. They have this 1-year growing period. It doesn't work all the time, but it works. maybe it works half the time. Forest, no. I mean, how long has that even been there since '97? It probably isn't. It hasn't even had time to grow into a forest.
That's more problematic than
Yeah.
the marsh.
Just think of all the ecological functions forest provides for us, protecting our homes from wind and tornadoes and storms, bird habitat. Um, it anchors the land, carbon sequestration, forests. Yeah. So the legal hooks, as far as the conflicts, are not as strong as with the coastal restoration and levee projects, but still something like, man, we already repaired this place and we're going to go mess it up again. Let's not do that. This list shouldn't exist. And then these are old, these MMPs are old shape files for master plan stuff. So it just shows a similar thing. We've got some minor hydrologic restoration that this is messing with, as well as the old levee layer, the North Lafourche and South Lafourche levees, which have been named different things above. And then there's previous permits. We have other permits in this area. So we're probably going to find, we've got a lot that have even been issued in 2018. Some of which is probably our Exxon. Do we see our Exxon permit? Our previous, pipeline maintenance permits. So these are all other permits that are within that. I think this is quarter mile is blue.
Yeah, I think so.
Within that buffer. So this is listing all the potential conflicts. Of course, there's been the coast has been dug up so much that this list is very long. It's hard to know what you're looking for even. There's polygons. Yeah, our Exxon would be in the lines, right? So, or no, it would be in the points. Shoot. Well, anyway. So these wetlands have already been ripped up a whole lot. So if you wanted to talk about cumulative impacts, we might send the Army Corps of Engineers this list of how many hundreds of permits are already in this right of way. And then seismic permits. So they have people going in the wetlands setting off little bits of dynamite. Enforcement sites. So these are places where people have refused to get permits. And they were messing with the wetlands, and DNR had to go out there and slap them on the wrist, tell them stop, and fine them, and maybe even get them to fix it. We can hope they fixed it. Consistency, these are other federal projects, which I don't know why Maurepas Pipeline is in there. That's frustrating to me. I don't know why this gets a consistency designation. That is a private company, whereas a bunch of these other things are usually federal government. So that's disturbing. Loop LLC.
What is consistency referring to?
If you don't have to get a outright permit, there's a consistency review. If there's a federal interest in your project, it's like a lower level of review. These are the things that we only have 15 days to comment on, and we don't see the location or the magnitude of impact. So who knows? Here's the Corps of Engineers. They have something going on close to this project. Here's National Marine Fisheries. They might have wanted to do that, that restoration of the water flow. NRCS, they might have done a wetlands restoration, soils restoration. Loop and low cap are public oil infrastructure. Although I guess they're now not so public. I'm not clear. But the loop is like, at one point it was, considered vital to national security. Now that we produce all of our own oil and more, I think that should be reevaluated. You can see they get a lot of different permits throughout. And now this one, which is Shell, Maurepas Pipeline, is basically Motiva and Shell Motiva. It's probably a crude oil pipeline because part of their Maurepas Pipeline is part of Motiva's Louisiana refining system. It's like a mega refinery by connecting single refineries with all these pipelines across them. So it's part of a mega refinery system. And because we're talking St. James Parish, this is probably the crude oil component, because I think the other components are all on the East Bank and are refined products. So that's all. Those are just a short list of the conflicts, you know, reasons you wouldn't want to put a pipeline in this location. And so that can go into a comment letter, etc. That's what the GIS report does. But also it gives you a map in the live map link. You could show someone, you know, exactly where it's at. But lastly, there is the permit application link. And you'll click on this and it might give you, you might quickly see 5 different things. I think we're not going to see that. It'll usually bring up the latest one. I think we only have 1 at this point because we're still very early. If there were multiple applications, you'd see multiple GIS reports because it's kind of an automatically generated thing. We're going to click on that. There's only 1. Click on that again. Just get rid of this. And this is a joint permit application to the Corps and to DNR. So sometimes you can find the Army Corps number on this document. It might be a little early. Ace Pipeline from Houston, called Todd in the 892 area, the 832, sorry, area code. Where is Todd? Houston, no doubt. Okay, I should know that. And you know, the people filing the paperwork for Todd is Morris F. Hebert and Tim for Todd. It's a permit. There's been a meeting, wow, held April of last year. So that's interesting. They've been working on this for 8 months. You're making a face.
I'm just surprised that there's no notice of anything until just now, and that there's still no.
Right.
There is no public notice.
Right.
It's just this.
They give you 1 latitude and longitude, of course, the pipeline. So see the permit plats. Our plats is just the maps. And then where is it? It's in St. James. The project will begin at St. James and terminate at the loop. Water-based activities can be accessed via boat among bayous and various unnamed oil and gas canals. So we're going to go through some other people's infrastructure. We're probably going to go through spoil banks. So maybe a good comment is, hey, while you have all these backhoes and excavators, why don't you fill the unused canals, right? And here's all the landowners. This is something that, you know,
Oh, wow.
these are private landowners. We're going through fast lands, so that means you're going to have a lot of, I'm seeing a lot of Zarangs. Some folks.
So you mean like families?
Families, yeah. You know, Zarang family, pretty big family. Maybe it's somebody you know. Maybe it's Wagasback Land Holdings. Maybe it's a corporation. There's probably some pipeline companies that might own a bit of land here or there. There's Mr. Stephen Peltier in Thibodaux. There's Raceland Raw Sugar. All that stuff, you know, is something that some of our partners want. So I'm going to just sit down and put it on my notes.
You're in your footer. Oh, no.
I'm in the footer. No. Oh well. These are supposed to be my scrap notes as a Google Doc. Oh, maybe it just took a long time.
Yeah.
I'll just save that for later, so I have a copy. So if you know their phone number, you can call them, see if they have any opinions about this. You know, the ACE pipeline will safely transport North American crude oil from terminals in St. James. We know that it ain't safe if it's coming from St. James. How many oil spills they have a year? Oh, God. And it says the purpose to multiple refining centers along the Gulf Coast. Although, you know, Travis has told us in this Swordfish pipeline, which seems to have the exact same footprint, and ACE, what kind of name is ACE? ACE is like AAA or Acme, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, later on they'll get to call it like something like Special Marsh Flower Pipeline, right? But we're not in the Special Marsh Flower name yet. We're in the generic name for this permit application. Swordfish. No, it's not going to be marsh flower because they said swordfish. Swordfish is like the market name.
Yeah,
and they'll probably create another LLC for that.
Pride of the Marsh.
Yeah. So the pipeline is going to bring us bunnies and life and good things. Proposed project start date is in the middle of 2019. Proposed project completion date is March 2020, and the market's not in progress. There's a lot of excavations and fill, so this is a source of some acreage of impact. It gives us about 860 acres total impact. That's the acreage footprint for just digging. But there's a subset of that will be wetlands. It'll say how much is crushed stone, limestone, how much is excavated, placed on site, how much is sand, how much is board mats. Really, we want more board mats and less sand. It's more work, more jobs, less hydrologic alteration. What equipment will be used? Airboat, backhoe, barge mounted bucket dredge, HDD drill, no hand jet, that's good. No drag line, that's good. No bulldozer, that's good. Although, you know, they're probably going to have a bulldozer if they're bringing sand in.
Yeah, when you need it.
I don't know what they're going to raid the sand with, but maybe it's one of these other tractor wheeled vehicles.
Right.
Marsh buggy, definitely. And the backhoe might be on a marsh buggy.
It's on a barge.
Self-propelled pipeline barge. I've never seen that. Tugboat. So here, project alternatives, total acres of wetlands.
What is
586. Oh, sorry, horizontal drilling equipment.
Oh.
So we talked about push.
Yeah.
So
related to that?
Boring or horizontal drilling is drilling. So anything you need to drill an oil well, which is toxic lubricants, drilling muds, bentonite clay.
But they're not drilling for
Diesel
oil in
pumps.
this, are they?
No,
They're
but
just
it's the same.
Oh, it's the same process.
Same
It's
kind of
like-
process. You're
Yeah.
just drilling horizontally. So you still have the drill bit. You're still chewing a pipe-sized path through the earth. You're just doing it in a curved horizontal fashion. Total acres impacted. This is our habitat. So 586.31 acres. Boom. This is huge. So that right there says they should be applying for an environmental impact statement. You know, the 300 acres Bush to I-12 highway from the town of Bush into Covington had an EIS just for all of the impacts. 300 acre impacts, EIS, boom. It's so huge. That's nationally significant. How many wetland permits for 586 acres are issued in the United States every year? Probably less than 3, and probably all within Galveston and New Orleans district. You might have some that are that big in Florida for residential development. but good golly, that's a shit ton of acres. Not as much as Bayou Bridge. And why not? It seems big, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
It seems very big. Bayou Bridge wasn't much bigger, even though it was 4 times longer. So
Oh, really?
that's another flag for me. We got the sand, and we have too many wetlands. That can be minimized. I think that can be shrunk in half. Because if we just hold them to previous standards and make the right of way, so that sounds like a wide right of way to me. It doesn't need to be 10 dang acres for every mile of pipeline. That's sloppy engineering and sloppy project management. So I'm confident, Naomi, we're going to save some dang trees already.
Me too.
Yes. So there's alternative locations. We have a PDF for that. What efforts were made to minimize? This project is designed to have minimum amount of adverse impacts, choosing a route which allowed for 97.5% of the pipeline to be within existing utility corridors. You'll hear this existing corridors thing a lot in Louisiana. One, we have a lot of corridors. We have a lot of oil pipelines already, so the question is like, well, why? If we already have Exxon here, do we even need you? Doesn't make much sense. But EPA likes to cut down on habitat fragmentation, so that is a consideration. We don't want to create new fragmentation of this forest. That's not bad, but if you're more experienced, you know that there's no numbers on this. They just say minimum, which is another flag for me. They should say 75-foot right of way, no clearing above horizontal drill sites. That's pretty standard. I think coastal management would agree. This is sloppy. It's vague. Come on, man. BS. You'll save you money. Save us wetlands. We're trying to save you money, ACE Pipeline. So we're going to comment. How are unavoidable impacts to be mitigated? We don't know. This is like,
We don't care yet.
this 2 sentences say, we're going to follow all the rules. They don't. And this is the problem with mitigation. It's like, they don't even know what they're harming. And it's kind of disappointing that they don't upfront respect the wetlands. So it's just item number 10. It's a kind of flag. I wish this would happen less often. The kind of just basic disrespect for the resources. But unfortunately, this one's pretty common. So we got 4 or 5 flags besides all the coastal restoration conflicts. Yeah. Are you the sole oyster lease holders? So we've got oyster. Oh, okay. These are landowners. So these are all the people who've gotten mailed a copy of the thing. So it's probably the same as the previous list. I'm not going to copy. Does the project involve drilling for oil? No, it involves drilling, but not for oil. They paid $100. And then here are your PDF documents that are key. So you can see what that meeting was. And so earlier on, we had a list of 4 documents that we didn't know what they were. They weren't labeled. These are the same documents. They're just at the bottom. They're in part 13 of the application. So let's see, pre-application meeting attendee list in April, last year, after the Bayou Bridge pipeline was permitted, you can see James Little.
Is he always on the list? Or?
He's always the pipeline guy.
Oh, okay.
He's never responded to phone call or email in like 8 years.
Oh my
Maybe
goodness.
once. I think he responded to James once. These are people from Phillips 66. Very interesting. People from MPH.
What's MPH?
That's the permitting company. Cornelius Williams from Wildlife and Fisheries. You know, Cornelius used to work for Coastal Management, so maybe he got a promotion. Dave Butler, longtime wildlife guy. Zachary Chain, I haven't seen his name. Robert Morgan, Zach, same last name as Carl, but he's working for the Corps. Jane Brown, Albert Terry. I don't know these people at the Corps, but they might be the biologists. John Herman, James Little, the regulator. Mike Farabee is the boss of James Little. And again, Jay Pico is likely going to be the person that we email if we email anyone about that. And a lot of times, Office of Coastal Management, people have zones because they know more about the biology. And you'll see this with the Corps too. James Little does every pipeline. They know about pipelines. You get to know something, I guess you're good at it. And then Elizabeth phoned in.
All right.
From DEQ. So there may be a record in the DEQ records. We can check that later. And then Noah had Miss Twyla Cheatwood. So if we're concerned about fish impacts on the coast, we can talk to Twyla. And usually that's just what you get for this kind of pre-application meeting. No notes are taken, it's just who was there. So if you want to know what was discussed, you can call any of these guys and figure it out. Previously we heard about Phillips 66 wanting to do a pipeline in this area, but they wanted to go all the way to Chalmette. So I have to go back and look at the records because this would probably replace, I'm hoping it would replace. Otherwise, they might see this as one part of a pipeline that goes to Chalmette. So they might be planning to do even more stuff.
Is there a Phillips 66 refinery in Chalmette?
There's a Phillips 66 refinery in Ironton.
That's like Chalmette Way?
It's on the way.
Mm-hmm.
It's on the way from Clovelly to Ironton, Ironton to St. Bernard to Chalmette Refinery. And there's just another way they could market the pipeline. And they might be using an existing pipeline. They're probably using the CAM pipeline. So hopefully this is the same idea. I don't want to see two pipelines of Phillips 66, that's just really.
Yeah, why would you? They're already using one. Why would you need another one?
And they're currently rebuilding the CAM pipeline out of St. Bernard Parish. So this probably, the only component that's missing would be, Clovelly to Ironton, which it might have, I know they have an existing pipeline there too. So hopefully this is the only wetlands permit that they're seeking, and they're using existing pipes to complete anything if they want to go to Chalmette. Let's just hope. But it's interesting. What is this company? It's Ace Pipeline. No, it's not. It's Phillips 66.
Why do they stay? I mean, do they create a separate company for this project?
Oh yeah, it's like an onion. Yeah, they always do. I mean, Phillips 66 is also a part owner of the Bayou Bridge.
Okay.
So it's very likely that they were waiting for the Bayou Bridge to be permitted to plan this next phase of that crude oil transfer from the Bakken Shale. Okay.
So what are those?
So route analysis, and hopefully we get a list of wetland impacts, but since it wasn't in the database, probably not yet. But this, for any pipeline, they have to do alternatives if they go through wetlands. So they probably did an alternatives analysis. As we've seen before, a lot of these alternatives, they tend to be really weak. And as advocates, we want to take a larger view. So you propose this to me. It's crude oil export, and, or is it for export? They say it in the financial pitch, export. They say in the permit, no, we're keeping this within the United States. So
so exporting it is going to get you more money? Is that?
Yeah,
Okay.
but it also increases the amount of regulation that should happen. So to the regulator, they're going to say one thing. To the money people, they're going to say the other thing. And this is a constant problem. Is this an interstate pipeline project?
Right. Then that's different. Yeah.
It is if they're exporting the oil to another country.
Right.
But if they're not, then it's not, and you don't have to regulate it as much. So there's not going to be that kind of alternatives analysis in this document. I'm guessing. Let's just see. It's probably going to be a minimal. We're going to shift it a meter here, shift it a meter there. We're going to go around the bald eagle nest, and that's about it. And let's see.
Oh, MPH is ours.
Morris P. Abear. Yeah, it's a company that does environmental and regulatory services. They're generally engineers, GIS people. I think the better they are, the more leaves they have in their logo.
Well, I mean, you could have leaves and doesn't BP have a bunch of leaves?
Good point. All right, route analysis. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a matrix, wetland impact comparison, and then you have these appendices, which are maps. You have some acronyms that tell you it's going to go through some swamp, some state land. There's a location. We've seen a little bit about this. There's industrial developments it goes through in Chack Bay. There's wetlands everywhere, including some swamps. And we looked at all of these. We didn't want to impact wetlands. We didn't want to, but it's still enormous. Existing corridors, levees, WMAs, existing infrastructure, safety standards, landowner concerns. So we're doing this in 58.1 miles, which is the second shortest. They'll usually kind of pick to be like, oh, here's some ones that kind of look okay, and we reject them. But it's usually kind of.
They're really similar in length, though, so.
It's all the same.
Yeah.
They're not. I would want this like, okay, you're exporting oil. Why can't we export it out of Houston and avoid all of this?
Yeah.
There's already like 10 pipelines over there. Why can't we use the existing Exxon pipeline to Clovelly to deal with this? There's really no public purpose for this. Also, you're going to crash oil prices. Like, I don't know. You're like the premise of this pipeline is just kind of insane. They're saying that they need so much more capacity than anyone has. Why build 4 pipelines to do the same job? So, you're going to see. This is a different wetland number than before, but option 2 is the lowest, so that's the one they want. They'll never make the one they want, option 1. It's kind of like if there's a rhetoric with charts, this is how you do it, right? Oh, we considered this first.
Right.
And then we improved
We
it.
did even better than that.
Even better than that. Yeah, right. Sure. Whereas usually they pick out something beforehand based on landowners and land prices.
Well, look at the 3 lowest ones, they're really close, whereas the option 3 is a lot more, 570.
Yeah. Sometimes they'll do that. Joe would do that with us and be like, well, what if we went over here? It'd be twice as much. You don't want that, do you?
Like negotiation strategy.
Yeah. So this seems you don't see a lot of detail here, and you don't see, but they're considering like this is like number of levees we impact. It's like it's a lot no matter what you do. Really, the regulatory system considers all that. The core, it's about wetland acres, right? And I'm mystified that this number is different than DNR thinks. So that's interesting. They say 507, DNR said 568. It's so big, you misplaced 60 acres of forest here and there now. I mean, I'm like, it's hard. This is hard. It's hard. Okay.
So, but there's no, do they need to give a justification for the project in the first place? Or, I mean, do we have any, as advocates, we would want to talk about that, right? That there's no need for it, but is that part of their their proposal, like, they don't have to say anything about why it's necessary, right?
Well, they're saying two different things. Again, they say one thing to the money people and another thing to the government, to get the least amount of regulation possible. The government's trying to decide whether or not there's a public interest in destroying all these resources. And they're kind of talking out of both sides of their mouth already. Between Swordfish, ACE, Phillips 66, everybody has a different design on what this thing is for. And that's, you know, they're gonna pay, I'm surprised they haven't paid, you know, some lobbyists already to carry this. With Bayou Bridge, we saw Mary Lander, you know, with, you know, someone who knows the government, who knows the Corps, who used to be the Corps' boss. You hire someone's old boss. Yeah. So they could hire Mary Lander again. They could hire Edwin Edwards as Formosa, right? That's the kind of corruption that we see where they, you know, they hire these people and they push it through. And look, we made a chart, so we satisfied the regulations. Look at that. Look at that chart. It's pretty. Look, they even used Excel. I can tell that Excel template. Look how pretty that is. They paid someone, you know, $7 an hour to make that. All right. So, you know, these are also things that are considering. Levees and federal waterways are a pretty big deal. Here's a general location. There's the loop. We got to get, the project's purpose is to get from A to B.
Oh, okay.
So there's already an Exxon pipeline that does that, but whatever, we're going to do it again for reasons unspecified. And there's your options, right? So not very, you know, immediately a flag that comes to mind is, well, why don't you reuse Exxon? What's Exxon doing? Why are you going to go in the same right away? And it looks like our preferred is option 2 in yellow, probably because it cuts through all these landowners rather than to natural resources. This is our big wetlands one. This is our, like, let's just do the wetlands. And go through Lake Buff. Okay, so now I see. I thought the project went through Lake Buff. This is like.
Okay. The wildlife management.
So always, if we complain about alternatives, they can come back and say, well, we wanted to avoid this, but you didn't want us to go and endanger the wildlife management area, will you? Sorry, I'm ripping off Chocolate Trap House, but yes, it's like a rhetorical. This is a total rhetorical strategy rather than a real alternative analysis on how to export crude oil in the United States. So these are just more maps. Here's what's interesting now that there's more requirements now in 2019 on the geographic information that has to be provided. And what do we got? We got the map file. Route 2 option MXD.
But that's not available to us.
Not yet.
Uh-huh.
But it's a document
Uh-huh.
that exists that has been given to the Corps of Engineers.
So we can FOIA that is
We can
what
FOIA that.
I see. So at least is that one of the requirements that's new, is to have the names of the documents
Right.
Printed on it?
Yeah. And this is the one they prefer, number 2. It was yellow before, now it's preferred. Isn't it? Oh, no, it's not. Wait. Shoot. Okay. Route 2, option 4. I'm getting things mixed up. Maybe it is option 4, but they're only making one option.
That's the last one. The last one is preferred.
3 is the big one. 2 is the least amount of wetlands. Okay, this is the one that it hurts landowners. So they're saying we can't do the minimal. Okay. This is option 2 would minimize wetlands, but we're hurting too many landowners and going through too many levees. So what is this now? Option 1. Is option one the one they picked then? It is going through Lake Buff.
It is?
Yeah. So yeah, it's not going through our Exxon route. I see. It's going through a slightly different one. And that's the one.
Oh,
that
Lake Buff,
is-
it's like the south end of Lake Buff?
Yeah,
Is that, okay.
there's it on the map. So that's why I missed it before, because this preferred option is different than the one that Travis had. So that's interesting. Good God, I hope they don't have another one of these proposed. They shouldn't do two. That would be just insane. But they've already got 3 pipelines that do the same thing, so it's not so insane that Louisiana wouldn't permit it.
Right.
We definitely have to raise a fuss about all this. Yes. All right, this is getting pretty long. But I still have some big documents to go through. That was your basic route analysis. You know, a lot of your work that the Corps is going to do is through the route analysis. This is your engineering diagrams about how it's going to exit, where it's going to cross. It's going to cross this drainage canal. Oh, is it crossing Burton Lane? I don't think so. Burton Lane's up here. We're south of Burton Lane, coming out of the back end of whatever this is in St. James, coming around here, going south, crossing the St. James Canal, hugging the road. So they did a preferred, this is their preferred option, and they give you the mile, a location. There's some clues to landowners here. Mr. Beckmill and Mr. Cromwell. Bayou Sintamon, Bayou Chevreul. So it's not going through Bayou Beret, or it's going through Bayou Chevreul. It's a little bit eastern than what I thought. Still, there's a hell of a lot of forest. We want them. We still haven't gotten to a right-of-way width though, and we need to get either this CAD file here. This is not done in April. So in April, they were just looking at lines on the map and said, "Oh, we still think we're going to do it." Now by November,
they made some.
by November, the boys in Baton Rouge at Bear Inc. have been drawing some things. And they're, going, this is all supposed to be in existing corridors. Here's where it gets close to some folks. Grand Bayou Way. Can't see exactly where that is. A lot of forest. Forest, all up in here. And this is marsh.
Yeah, and that's Lake Buff.
Yeah, that's Lake Buff. It might show you the landowner. The state is a landowner. It's going through some fast lands. It's going through some mitigation. And there's some mitigation banks. And then it has to cross other pipelines. 1, 2, 3, 4, Dow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, those pipelines were referred to before in the GIS reports, but as numbers, right? We didn't see which we didn't see the name, but we know that this ExxonMobil pipeline is something we've been concerned about, and that has a bunch of permit numbers associated with it. So if we want to know things about how likely are pipelines to crack and leak, we can look at that permit document and see how often that pipeline has spilled, leak, and that's fodder for commenting. Yeah, it's dipping into some of the fast lands south of Lake Buff. And I know I know with some certainty that there are mitigation banks right around here. And in fact, there might be mitigation for the Coors Levee project. Here it goes in the fast lane again before exiting past Raceland. Hit it. Yeah. So, why Portuguese? That's different names on different maps. Again, through forests, although some of this may not be forest anymore given the land loss. We've got deteriorating conditions, and especially as we head further south, we've got old oil fields and especially deteriorating conditions. There's Ted Falgo's land. He's a politician. And it's going through an old agricultural thing, Delta Farms, and in the marsh. And so where we already have a lot of deterioration from hydrologic alteration, or we might be adding to that in these marshes. But this is also an opportunity to mitigate a lot of the existing damages. So, you know, if this were a good company, part of their mitigation, and remember, for their mitigation plan, they're not even thinking about it. They said, what is the mitigation? We don't know. We're just going to do whatever. Yeah. Whatever. What is that? You know, we're just going to follow the rules. But, you know, if this were a company and they hired me as their wetland specialist instead of Morris Adair, I would say, well, hey, let's mitigate these hydrologic alterations down the coast. There's a lot of freshwater marshes. They're trying to be restored by the AMA sediment diversion. We can really restore a lot of the surrounding marsh by leveling spoil banks that we're going to go through. So that's a big comment. There's lots of spoil banks that could be repaired while you have all the guys out there. We're hiring some Louisiana boys, and it's boys, sorry, Naomi. It's not how the oil and gas.
It's always boys.
There might be one or two ladies that are hired by oil and gas industry, but it does not tend to be that way, I have to say. Especially for field work.
I know.
No, you get hired by Shell and make
for
your secretary. Yeah. You can see there's already pipelines out there. This is an opportunity to repair the damages of all the previous pipelines, because we're going to have all of the workers in the marshes and fix things. We saw Bayou Bridge, they didn't give a toss. They didn't give 2 cents. They built that pipeline in the spoil bank. They did us double dirty. You know, they're going to destroy it, and they're going to be so lazy. They're not even going to fix what's out there while they're out there. Why they have excavation equipment to do the job. Like it's moving like hundreds of cubic yards of fill around. Would fix these hydrologic alteration problems. And they just, no. So I doubt that, these, and the agencies aren't going to make them do it either. It's depressing. So much opportunity lost. Here's our right-of-way diagram. And I've got 50 foot, 30 foot, 20 foot, 5 plus or minus. So that is 105, which is 100 foot workspace. Okay, this 5 plus or minus is not included. But 100 foot workspace, cut that to 75 feet. You gotta be kidding me, 100 foot workspace. You can't be cutting out 25 extra feet of trees. You know, who made you God?
So like what?
That's ridiculous.
75 is normal or plenty?
Yeah. Bayou Bridge was bigger than this and had a smaller right away. So come on. 100-foot workspace. 75-foot workspace in forested wetlands. Okay, a little better. Okay,
Wait, which
okay,
ones?
okay.
75 where?
In forested wetlands.
Okay.
I don't understand why you can't use the existing right-of-way as workspace. I think they are. You know, this could be shifted right or left. It's still so many acres affected. I have to see. There's the, you know, spoil travel lane. That's interesting. It's more honest than some.
Right, maybe they're just saying this is what's actually gonna happen.
And there's our timber mats. Okay, I'm good with the timber mats. Timber mats. We should have some typicals. There's different things for different environments. So here we have one without a timber mat in a marsh area.
Isn't that just a board road?
Board road, yeah, yeah. Timber mat is a board road.
Okay, so why, but they said they weren't using that.
No, they are. They're using less than we want.
Oh,
But these typicals do not give you the proportion. Okay. So, and then this is a bore or a horizontal drill. This is there's extra temporary workspace of 50 feet extra. And typical 100-foot for any time they have to go underneath and do a drill or a bore underneath a waterway. You know, I think this could be cut down. It is for the Raceland Stockyard. Sometimes they have to go underneath pipelines. It's hard to read that. Road. This is a road, so this is just going under a road. The road is typically higher than the area around it. And this is a typical for a bore under a road. This is more of a push, I guess. It's not an open cut because they're not going to excavate the road. This is a horizontal drill.
Okay.
There's your horizontal. You've seen that working on utility lines, right? This is like a big one of those. Yeah. So 50-foot temporary race workspace. I don't know why we have any 100-foot right of ways though. Like why?
Yeah.
Why you can do 75?
Really big track.
No. They already did this with a 75-foot right of way for 5 times as long. So, and this is another one. I don't know what that 44 is. This is a stream crossing where they would do a very, very long horizontal drill. This is for the road. So either for a road or for a stream, do horizontal drill. So, or a lake. In the Atchafalaya Basin, we got by a bridge to avoid a lot of lakes.
They go under them.
They go under them. Or a levee. They don't have typicals for a levee, but you might imagine a drawing very similar. This is like a little stream.
Isn't it problematic when they drive something under the land, especially as you get closer to the coast? Isn't subsidence a problem for that?
Or in pipeline. They also do it for pipelines, and they're probably let's see a levee typical, guys. Give me a levee. This is another pipeline. Is it a problem? I mean, yeah. I mean, all these are typical. They're kind of fantasies of what actually happens. Is that the railway? That is a railway. So similar to a road. They should have more about sediment control. I don't see any sediment control on this thing. Maybe it's written, but they should have sediment control. Come on, guys. You could just copy and paste the Bayou Bridge permit. They didn't do sediment control. There's a valve.
So no levee and no sediment control typicals.
Yeah, they're going to have to do probably a 408. Oh, and look at this. Look at this. This is a push station diagram. They don't always have these, but you know, it rolls into the pipe ditch. Okay. Here's a big waterway, Gulf Intercoastal right away. They have specific things in mind with the Shell oil pipeline. Calculation chart, how many cubic yards. So this might be an interesting chart. If we want to comment on it, we have to transcribe it. Wetland impacts by parish. So this is the kind of thing we want in a spreadsheet. So one of our jobs is to take this thing and make it into an Excel document somehow. And then they have high quality, medium quality, low quality. So they've already thought a lot about it between April and November. And we have temporary bald cypress impacts, which makes no sense.
Right.
There's no such thing.
Yeah.
So all kinds of details to think about. And then we have a list of maps. So if they don't have the maps,
Whoa.
Yeah, more typicals, no sediment control. This is just, we rip up. We just rip up the marshes, so not a big deal.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. This is more and more pages of this plan view. These are for roads, so it tells you where pump stations are going to go. Sometimes that matters particularly. You can get the locations by, you can just do a road search, really. But they should have the longitude, latitude. And really what we want are the GIS information that we know the Corps has. It's been delivered as a document and governed per session. So we can start doing a FOIA request. Oh, we need a lot more in terms of construction, but there's going to be a lot more. There's a lot more rules that they need to be following, but it turns into rules that their subcontractors ignore. And then when you point that out, they're like, oh, it's not our fault, it's the subcontractor's fault, right?
Right.
But, if you want to protect a particular area, you're going to have to be out there watching them. And that's what we have in the Atchafalaya Basin, but we don't have that in a lot of other places. Here are wetlands. Are we on hour 2 of this?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, but we're recording it, so hopefully that means that fewer people will have to do this again and again. Did investigations in the spring and the summer. So if you have biological stuff that only pops up in the winter, that's what you want to comment on. So that's typical. They don't do too many surveys, and they need to do it in a growing season. And they need to do at least 2 to look at water levels. So I've done that, but there's a lot of stuff you miss if you only look at it twice, right? As opposed to someone that lives there. We got some crawfish ponds, numerous canals, Choctaw Road. We have these community types. These are federal types and not the state types. You know, and these are the different species. These are just typical dominant. This is just a species. So, you know, you can then cross-reference this to see if any of these are rare. These are all the plants, because this is a wetlands report, and you know, wetlands isn't concerned about wildlife; it's concerned about water-loving plants. Hydrology, not a lot here, but it's talking about different indicators that you can pick up in a single survey. Okay, and then soils information is done by color chart and then reference materials. Again, it's like very quick. So if if you're from this area, you know a lot more. This is like kind of the very generic soil science evaluation. But someone who is farming these areas is going to know a lot more about how their property drains compared to the depth of this analysis. And this is just kind of repeating these generic soil science details. I wish they would give kind of like percentages, and maybe they do. And they surveyed a bigger area than they're going to impact. They surveyed 16.5 wetlands. So 114 waters possessing something. I don't know that one. OHWM. 200 acres of waters. Here's Bayou Buff, Battery, Grand Bayou, Cinnamon, Pier, Bayou de la Gauche. Section 10, regulated waters can be avoided via the drilling technique. And then there is a permit package for water crossings. Okay, well, we already did some work. And sometimes the Corps does this work, but rarely. There's the Corps manual. These guys are professionals. They've been trained in all this wetlands delineation. We're still, a lot of times we're looking at data from, the 70s and 80s. So your environmental data, the funding to update that is federal. So especially with things like the government shutdown, forget about it. This is kind of upside down, probably, maybe. This is the connector into the existing thing. That doesn't look good, right? Whether or not this has an oil spill in it. I think it's upside down, coming out of the back of, what is that? Loop or Marathon?
Isn't it supposed to be coming out of
Phillips 66, maybe? I don't know. I get lost. And then these are fast lands. These are all farmlands. And these are water bodies, ditches and bayous. And maybe some pits out the back of the fast lands. And you hit forest pretty soon. Green is marsh, red is forest. And you get to see whether or not it crosses, avoiding this drainage canal. Interesting. you know, and you can kind of see what they prioritize. What's missing from this diagram is the depth of the pipeline later. That might be in the MXD files that we have. Here's wetland page 3. You know, so we want to get this. We know that this exists. We want a depth file to see if they go underneath this water body. We want to see the depth of the crossing. See, there's the increased workspace. That's got to be 100 feet. You know, we could save a lot of these trees here. God damn, they don't need to kill all that trees. Whatever. You have to do that, man.
Take a break.
Yeah, well, we're coming to the end.
Oh. Well, not to this document. There's like 500 pages.
Well, yeah, but it all looks like this.
Oh, okay.
But you know, if you know your cousin who's living in Chack Bay or wherever, you're gonna want to show them these things.
Yeah.
But we can FOIA. What I want to do that's new is FOIA this MXD and open it in a GIS and give very specific comments on where they need to not cut down some trees, or where they need to back. Let's go to the other end and look at canals. You know, we want very specific comments on that. These are all the field reports.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. For Bayou Bridge, these are all like blank. So that's fascinating. They actually did them. Different companies do different jobs. And, you know, we've got hundreds of acres. So what have we got to the application? I guess in a part 2, we'll look at the environmental justice review and how that pertains to a comment. Because we know we're starting off in an EJ community in St. James, and we're probably going to end up going through a lot of Native American properties. So we'll come back and we'll go through, you know, looking at the shapefile we do have from DNR, the preferred route, which block groups it crosses, and whether or not that disproportionately impacts Black folks in St. James and Native folks in Lafourche Parish.